If you have followed this channel for a while, you might have known that I have experimented with ways of recommending low-end friendly games that you might not have heard about in the past. We live in times where big games often go in directions that are objectionable, and I think it is important to support the work of small groups of passionate developers producing good art, especially when many of those games give us a chance to enjoy an experience that works well on a large variety of hardware without any adjustments. And this week, I played something special. Blasphemous is a game that just released, a 2D metroidvania on its core, but several things make this one special among the many indie 2D metroidvanias out there. So on this video I will answer two questions. What makes this game special, aka why I noticed this game in the first place, and second, how and where it runs, aka why I decided to make a video about it. First, what makes this one different? For years, developers and artists have examined history and culture for ideas and inspirations for games. The Witcher series is loaded with creatures and spirits that come directly from Slavic folklore, and the Japanese have been so prolific in using their culture as inspiration that now it is a whole aesthetic for a lot of games in general. With the explosion of indie game studios worldwide, I hope to see more people channeling their local flair into games, and as someone with Spanish roots, I have been hoping for years for this to happen on this Iberian peninsula. Spain has a lot of history. Complex, complicated, and bloody history, and without going too much into the many objectionable parts,
nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition!
What has been left behind is a lot of imposing medieval and Gothic architecture and an interesting connection with its religion. Spanish Catholicism has a complicated relationship with penance and the necessity of suffering to reach atonement, and that becomes an integral inspiration for the world of Blasphemous.
And thus, guilt, repentance, mourning, and every pain of the soul of all kind were visibly and tangibly manifested everywhere and in all of us. Sometimes in the form of blessing and grace, sometime in the form of punishment and corruption. That divine will, equally pious and cruel, which we could not and will never be able to unravel, was called the miracle.
This inspiration runs strong. Every aspect of the game is deeply inspired by the different artistic manifestations of this philosophy on every level. If you grew up in any country with Iberic cultural roots, there's a lot of here that will feel very familiar in a weird, twisted way. From the inspiration and the symbology of El Sagrado Corazón de Jesús, to checkpoint altars that are clearly inspired by the altars carried during the Holy Week, the collectively secret children immediately bring back images of the very common representations of baby Jesus in tons of altars. This bridge that is taken straight from the Isabel II Bridge in Seville, which is where the developers are based on, or how often iconography has these roof decorations that are so common in thousands of Catholic Baroque altars. Look, I could go on and on, there's enough material here to make an hour-long video on how effectively the developers channeled a certain aspect of Spanish culture in a way that has never been quite done before in a video game, but you probably get the point already. Something else that I felt served as a source of inspiration that popped over and over what I was playing was the original Dark Souls. On the surface level, the comparison is so obvious that a million people have already made it, but on closer inspection the inspiration runs deeper, and this is a very good sign. The developers of this game seem to understand why certain things from the original Dark Souls worked, and adopted those things for greater effect, rather than copying just because. For example, mechanical things like when you die you return to the last rested checkpoint, and dying means losing something, in this case a penalty to your ability to earn the game currency and a progressive reduction of your special abilities bar. To gain it back, you travel to your point of death to undo the damage, which provides pacing and tension as you feel like a scuba diver with a lifeline to a safe zone exploring the unknown. With the added benefit that in Blasphemous you can have multiple points of death death, and you can go back and recover them all, so there's no tremendous fear of dying again. Another example is on the level design, which relies less on warps and more on well-thought looping paths based on shortcuts, which forces you to mentally map how every level is laid out in ways that are not quite reflected in the in-game map. But that allows you to move quickly from very far away zones, forcing you to actually pay attention to the level rather than just going forward or following a waypoint. Or, for example, how the game does not explain a lot of its plot, and most conversations and item descriptions are cryptic, and some effort is required just to get a basic grasp of what the heck is going on. But more importantly, Dark Souls worked, because gameplay complemented mechanics. The world was decadent, you were weak, you were stuck in a cycle of death and rebirth, and you could only overcome it by pure insistence. This works even better on the framing on Blasphemous, as the world is decadence because suffering is the cornerstone of this world's entire philosophy, and you fight because you're a penitent one, and your only path to forgiveness is through self-inflicted suffering. So here you are, dying again and again and again. This is good stuff. Add to all that the signs of attention to detail, like how well the controls of the Penitent One work on this context, or how the game is hard but not hard enough that it makes you lose your patience. I usually say that you can tell how much thought developers gave to an experience of the player based on the first level of any game and how its geometry and enemy placement should all serve to teach an important lesson about how the game works, and Blasphemous is a very effective first level. There's a lot of love put into this thing. In terms of visuals, as you have probably already noticed, it has some of the most impressive modern pixel art I have seen in a long time. And the cutscenes remind me of a lot of supercharged versions of something you will see in a very old PC game, just way more dark. It's pretty great. And that connects excellently with the topic of performance and the second question. So, what got me to talk about this game in the first place? I was originally a backer of this game when it first showed up in Kickstarter, a decision I made based on its potential for delivering its local inspiration. But I finally had a chance to try an actual demo of the game much earlier during this year on an event targeted at Spanish devs. While I was already surprised by how the game played, what got me was the machine the demo was running on, a Surface tablet with... what? So a typical response to this is, oh, it's a 2D pixel art game, of course it's going to be light. Here's the thing, I'm constantly on the hunt for indie games to play on my portable GPD-Win2 device, and you will be surprised how often I run into 2D titles that use way more resources than they should. So, this, working on the demo, not even a release game, that had my attention. The official requirements for this game do ask for at least a very old CPU and dedicated GPU and 4 gigs of RAM, but you can seem to get away with less. Since the GPD-Win2 was overkill for this, which is a weird feeling, let me tell you, I tried this on the original GPD-Win, which pretty much has the same specs as the demo machine but 4 gigs of RAM, so I artificially reduced it to only 2 gigs, and the game worked fine. Interestingly enough, while the game itself worked flawlessly, it seems that RAM requirements has to do with the cutscenes, which freeze and struggle when RAM limited. Once I removed the limit and rebooted back to 4 gigs of RAM, the cutscenes worked fine. I wish I could say the same for every game released with a retro aesthetic, but this worked just as you will expect. So, I have been intentionally using footage from the first hour of the game because there's some really cool weird shit later in this game that you have to experience firsthand. So if your computer sucks, but you want to try an experience, I'm hoping you will give Blasphemous a try. After all, it's up to us to support smaller studios actually pushing stuff forward. Don't let this game pass along unnoticed. Or this will become incredibly popular and this plea at the end of the video will sound really weird in retrospective. Either way, I'm happy. I'm going back to playing Blasphemous now. I want to see if I can 100% it.